There's nothing more frustrating than doing everything right and still watching the defeat screen. You stuck with your team, you didn't feed, you peeled when you were supposed to, you rotated like the guides told you to, and yet you lost. It almost makes you question whether the advice you've been following actually works. But here's the thing, you're not playing bad, you're playing correctly, but correct doesn't always win games. I used to think that if I just followed the rules and played by the book, the wins would eventually come. But the more I climbed, the more I realized that being correct isn't the same as being impactful. Sometimes you're losing not because you made a mistake, but because you never really made a difference. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about why playing properly isn't always enough, and what you can do to actually shift the outcome of your games. So the first point I want to talk about is you're playing safe and not really playing smart. Now there's a huge difference between playing safe and playing smart. Playing safe usually means hanging back, avoiding fights, not taking risks, basically doing everything you can to not be the reason your team loses. But here's the problem with that. When your entire mindset is based on avoiding mistakes, you also avoid opportunities. You miss chances to take space, to punish overextensions, to be the one who flips a fight, all because you're waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. I used to play like this all the time. I'd stick to the backline, keep my cooldowns unless I absolutely had to use them, and I'd pride myself on my low death count like that was the win condition. But guess what? We kept losing, because I wasn't losing us the game, but I wasn't necessarily winning it either. Safe play feels good because it's comfortable. You're less likely to get flamed, and you're less likely to be in the kill feed. But safe play isn't always smart, especially when it means giving up initiative, tempo, and pressure. Smart play is calculated. It's about when to be aggressive, not never being aggressive. It's about knowing that sometimes the most impactful play isn't the safe one. It's the one that forces a response, opens up a weakness, or turns the tide in your team's favor. And sometimes smart play looks messy. Sometimes you go in and die, but you draw resources, you break the enemy team's positioning, you let your team clean up behind you. And that doesn't always show up in the scoreboard, but it changes the game. So if you've been playing correctly and still losing, maybe it's time to stop playing not to lose and start playing to win. So the second thing I want to talk about is you're following the rules without understanding them. There's a point in every player's journey where they start consuming advice like it's the gospel. You know, take high ground, don't solo queue, use cover, group up. And at first, these tips do help. They give you structure, they correct bad habits, and they raise your floor. But eventually, following the rules becomes a crutch. You start doing things not because you understand why they work, but because you were told they work. You stop thinking and start mimicking. And that's where things start to fall apart because strategy isn't a checklist. The game is too fluid and complex for that. Positioning, timing, aggression, they all shift based on the map, the comp, and the flow of the match. And if you're still stuck playing like a tutorial bot, you're going to get punished by players who could actually read the game instead of just remembering it. And you know, I've been there. I'd play a fight by the book, hold my ult, take high ground, peel for the backline, and still lose. And I'd think, but I did everything right. Except I didn't. I did everything robotically. And the truth is, the best players break the rules all the time. They drop off high ground to secure a pick. They solo ult to swing tempo. They stagger to deny spawns. Not because they're reckless, but because they understand the rule well enough to know when to bend it. And that's what separates someone who's following advice from someone who's evolving past it. So if you're playing correctly and still losing, maybe it's time to stop asking, what's the right play here? And start asking, why is that the right play? And does it apply right now? That shift from copying to understanding, that's when things really start to click. So I kind of touched on this point a little bit earlier, but I really want to emphasize on why this is important. So the third thing I want to talk about is you're playing to not lose. There's a massive difference between playing to win and playing to not lose. And it's subtle because on the surface, both look like smart gameplay. You're holding angles, you're waiting for picks, you're avoiding risky flanks. But if you look closer, you're not creating pressure, you're avoiding it. You're letting the enemy make the first move and you're hoping they mess up before you do. That's not strategy, that's fear with good mechanics. The hard truth is this, playing to not lose will keep you from hard throwing games, but it'll also keep you from carrying any of them. And that's where the growth gets stuck. You get decent at surviving, you become consistent, but you stop making the plays that matter. The kind that swing fights, disrupt tempo, or force enemy mistakes. You plateau because you're no longer taking initiative, you're just reacting to it. And I get it, you don't want to be the guy who throws, nobody does. But never taking risk is its own kind of throw. It just happens slowly, quietly, until you're stuck in a backpedal with no pressure on the map and no presence in fights. Sometimes the right play is messy, and sometimes it's taking a duel you're 60-40 on, because winning it opens up the fight, and sometimes it's diving first, not because you're sure you'll win, but because someone has to go first. If you wait to play perfect, the opportunity usually passes you by. So ask yourself, when's the last time you initiated something? Not just rotated early or held your ult for value. I mean, when's the last time you created a play? When you saw something, trusted yourself, and acted before the enemy told you what to do. And that's the difference between playing not to lose and playing to win. So the next thing I want to talk about is you're too focused on your job. Now this one's a little tricky because it feels like you're doing everything right. You've learned your role, you know your job. Maybe you're the initiator. Maybe you're the healer. Maybe you're the one that's kind of looking for flanks, right? Whatever it is, you've committed to doing it well. And you are. You're clearing space, you're holding flanks, watching angles, peeling for your team. But here's the thing. You're so focused on your job that you stop seeing the bigger picture. You start staring at the same puzzle piece every time, but you're never looking at how the whole puzzle is shifting. You might hold the angle perfectly, but did the enemy even care about that angle? You might be ready to peel, but was the fight already lost before your team needed it? You might be doing your job, but is your job even what the team needs right now? Games aren't won by roles, they're won by responses. And if you're locked into a checklist, you miss those moments where the win condition changes. And it always does. Sometimes the best support doesn't always heal. They'll, scout a dive and pressure them out. Sometimes the best flanker doesn't flank. They help win the front line first. And sometimes the best tank, they don't hold W and walk forward. They wait, bait cooldowns, and then go in. Adaption always trumps routine. So here's the question. Are you playing your character or are you playing the game? Because the players who climb, they aren't the ones who always do their job. They're the ones who break their job when the situation demands it. They aren't bound by their role. They respond to the rhythm of the match, even when it means stepping outside their lane. When you're too focused on your job, you might become consistent, but you always become predictable. And predictable players don't shift tempo, they follow it. So stop thinking about what your job is and start thinking about what your team needs. That's when you stop just playing correctly and start playing impactfully. So here's my fifth and final point. You're confusing consistency with progress. And getting consistent feels good. You're not whiffing as much, you're not dying first every fight. Your games feel more stable, more in control, and in a way they are. But here's where a lot of players get stuck. They start chasing consistency instead of chasing growth. And the difference between the two, consistency is usually doing the same thing well. Growth is doing new things and failing until you get better. So while it feels like you're on the grind, you're actually plateauing. You found your comfort zone, and now you're clinging to it, afraid to break it. You don't take new routes because the old ones feel safe. You don't try new heroes because you don't want to throw. You don't push new mechanics because you don't want to mess them up in ranked or in front of your friends or in whatever. You're not playing to improve, you're playing to maintain, and that's not growth. See, progress doesn't feel clean. It's messy, it's ugly, and it often feels worse before it gets better. Improvement isn't a straight line. It dips, it stutters, it falls apart and rebuilds. You miss more shots because you're practicing new angles. You die more because you're testing new timings. You feel lost because you're learning to read the game in an entirely different way. That discomfort, it's not failure, it's friction. And friction means forward motion. But when you confuse consistency with progress, you start avoiding that friction. You cling to the version of yourself that feels stable, even if it's not the best you could be. So if you're wondering why you're not climbing, ask yourself, are you evolving or just repeating? Because real progress is not just about being good. It's about becoming something better, even if it means getting worse first. So don't settle for consistent, push for more. So if you've been doing everything right and still losing, maybe it's not your aim. Maybe it's not even your role. And maybe it's not even your team. Maybe it's about the version of you that's showing up every match. The version that's careful, not confident. Consistent, not curious. Stuck in rules instead of reading the room. And look, I've been there. I've played safe. I've played scared. I've done everything I thought I was supposed to do and wondering why it wasn't working. But the moment I stopped asking, what am I doing wrong? And started asking, what am I not even trying? That's when things changed for me. So if this video hit you in any weird way, maybe that's your sign. Not that you're failing, but that you're finally ready to grow past what's comfortable. And if that's where you're at, then I hope I see you back here. Because we're not just playing to win, we're learning to understand the game, just one thing at a time.
By the eye of Agamotto!
Let go!
I bring hell down on the
Double KO! They've almost got it!
Twigs all grown up.
Control seized!
Joe, you suck.
Bro, you didn't do nothing, bro.